Good morning, everyone. We are Cristina and Sara from One Woman Shop, which is a resource hub and membership community for female solo business owners. This is our weekly show that we call the Hot Seat, where we choose a different topic that relates to running your solo business, up-leveling your solo business, and we bring it into discussion, sometimes in really planned out formal ways and other times where we just kind of want to riff on something. So I'll let Cristina introduce our topic for today.
Sure. So you seemed a little confused about which one was Sara there.
Really I always point and then I never know.
So today our topic is outsourcing, because our theme on the blog, which we have a theme for every single month, is outsourcing. So it really fits pretty well, outsourcing with outsourcing. So we are talking about some best practices for outsourcing, how to know what to outsource. We are going to share with you some of our experiences with outsourcing, some which have gone swimmingly, others not so much. Lots of times it's because we made mistakes. So we'll be getting honest here. So Sara, do you want to kind of jump in with what we mean by outsourcing?
Yeah, so one of the things, I'll jump right into kind of what we're tackling as one-woman shops when it comes to outsourcing, because we call ourselves one-woman shops, so we automatically kind of set up this barrier to bringing anybody else into our business, whether it's in a formal or informal role. And so it's a really important topic to talk about, because for one-woman shops like us, for solopreneurs, it's really easy to get on a fast track to burnout if we don't bring on other people to help us in different ways.
Yeah.
So outsourcing can relate to a bunch of different things, and we'll get into that. It can be business, it can be personal, but two of the things I want to bring up right away from the get-go are the things that keep us from outsourcing in our business. The first thing, like I said, is that we define ourselves as one-woman shops, and so we think we have to do it all. Otherwise, I'm not truly a one-woman shop.
Right.
And Cristina, I know you have some notes on that, but then I'll just introduce the second one, which is really what, Jenny says, superwoman complex much? Exactly. The second one, which relates more to me, is that this idea of I want to do it all. Mm-hmm. Ooh, there's something that I don't know how to do. I want to learn how to do that. I love to learn. I want to figure this out. I want to understand everything that I'm doing in my business. So I want to learn web development because I want to know how my website's powered. So this feeling of I want to do it all, even if it doesn't make sense.
Yes, absolutely. And so I added in, Sara wrote those two notes, and I added in, quote, no one else can do it like I can. So I think this is something that we have both felt. It's pretty arrogant, but I know a lot of us have been there where you're like, I know how to do it, and no one else in the entire world can possibly do this tweet as good as I can. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it myself. Luckily, we have an amazing social media manager who's with us today, and she is awesome at writing our tweets. So there you go. Apparently, someone else can do it like us. But yeah, and then along with that, sometimes people can do it better than you can. And so I think our designer is a perfect example of that, where we could spend hours and hours and hours trying to learn design and learning the principles of design. But ultimately, a lot of it comes down to having an eye for it. I don't have an eye for it. So I'm not going to do our design anytime soon.
Yeah, so I think that's a really perfect lead-in into our discussion on how to know when to outsource something. And so the first glaring thing on that list is if it's something that you don't know how to do. And one of those things, like for us, like your example of design is perfect. We could spend hours trying to manipulate Canva because it is supposed to be a really great DIY design tool. So it's something that we don't know how to do, but it's also something that it doesn't make sense to learn. And that's really the crucial part of it. When we were talking about OWS Goes Back to School, which is our September theme on the blog, one of our fantastic guest posts was about how to know, or it was actually debunking the business myth of you should always be investing in yourself. Well, there are times when this perfect course comes along or workshop or whatever it might be, and it actually doesn't make sense to invest in yourself because it's not something that it makes sense for you to learn. And so it's definitely the combination of you don't know how to do it, and it also doesn't make sense for you to learn it.
Yeah. And just one caveat, got to start with the caveats here, is just because it doesn't make sense for you to learn it now doesn't mean you can never learn it. So just because we've decided that our time and energy and money is best spent on a designer doesn't mean we're never ever going to learn design skills. So that's a big no.
Absolutely. And so the big example for me right now in my solo business is actually in email marketing. So Paul Jarvis is releasing this Chimp Essentials course all about learning the ins and outs of MailChimp. We also have a one-woman shop member who has a fantastic MailChimp masterclass course. And so many times when I'm just like tinkering with stuff in MailChimp, I think to myself, I really wish I knew MailChimp better. I'm going to take one of these courses. Well, that does not make sense for me to spend hours going through a course to learn it when I literally just do tinker with it. And that's a perfect time for me to look at outsourcing email marketing to somebody that in the hours I would spend taking a course or trying to learn it, they can actually do everything that I need done and do it better than I would do it. So that's a really good example. But like you said, if it's something that you truly do want to learn, you know that you can always go back to it and learn it later. Or maybe it is something that you prioritize now, but you have to be really realistic about what you can handle.
Yeah, absolutely. You hear me?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, the Wi-Fi is acting up. I was just going to add in that just because you are not doing the process from start to finish, so going back to the design example, it's an easy one for us, is just because we are not actually designing doesn't mean that we aren't learning about design. You know, we're learning what together, what colors work together, how to best communicate with a designer. So there are a lot of parts of outsourcing that you still get to learn. So it's not like you're not developing as a business owner.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it really is when it comes down to judging whether or not it's something you should learn, looking at that opportunity cost of, if I spend the time learning this, what am I replacing and what could I be doing with that time instead? And that's been a huge help, I think, in one woman shop of looking at all the things we want to do and where our time is being spent and have that help us decide where to outsource.
Yeah, absolutely. We love our economics terms, opportunity cost, sunk cost. So always coming back to that and saying, okay, what is my strength and where can I be best spending my time? And is working on this thing for hours and hours and hours going to detract from that?
Yeah. So what would you...
Did I disappear from video?
No, I can still see you. You're making lots of great facial expressions, though.
These are my worried, I don't know if my Wi-Fi is working faces.
Well, while it is, you want to jump into another way that you know when it's time to outsource?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we've both experienced this, and I know every single person in the one-woman shop community has experienced this, where you're staring at something on your to-do list and you're like, I don't know why I'm not doing it, but I just don't want to be working on that thing ever or right now. And so definitely we're going to talk next week about stalling and procrastination. But if it's something that routinely is something you dread, or it's just not getting done, but it's necessary, that's a huge place where outsourcing could come in handy.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are a few things, like Cristina said, I dropped the link in for next week's hot seat because we're going to talk a lot more about stalling and procrastination and all the things behind that. But if it's something that absolutely is necessary for your business and you just dread it, it's a really good thing to look at outsourcing. We had one of our one-woman shop members, Julianne, wrote a post to kick off our outsourcing month on the blog. And one of the notes she basically wrote in there is, you create this business because you want to create a business you love. And we know that you have to do things that you're not super jazzed about in business. We all do. It's a necessary part. But if there are so many things that you just don't have the skill set for, and you just are dreading doing it, it does not make sense to force yourself to do it.
Right, absolutely. And I think that you and I like to keep it real and keep it honest and say, you're not going to love every single minute of your solo business. And I think that anyone who says that is being a little overly optimistic. But you can love the majority. And so outsourcing helps you really regain loving that majority of your time.
Definitely. So if anybody has any other tips for knowing when to outsource, or things that have red flags that have kind of set off in your business that have made you think maybe this is something I should outsource, definitely drop it in the chat. We take questions over on the other side. Just type the /NQ. But right now we're going to jump right into what can you do today to set yourself up for outsourcing, even if you're not ready necessarily to hire somebody right now.
Yeah. Oh, can I share an insight real quick before we get into that?
Oh, I think so.
Me? Thanks for allowing it. I feel like I'm so awkward today because I'm like, I don't know about my video. So I was just going to say that something that has really helped me in terms of justifying outsourcing is this idea. I think I got it from Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Workweek, which is a very interesting read. Highly recommend it. I don't think that it's realistic. That's a whole nother probably blab that we'll have to talk about. But one thing that he says is you shouldn't always be focused on reducing your expenses. You can also go on increasing your income. So if you think of that as just, it's two pieces, two sides of the same coin. Not always focused on spending the least amount of money, but really focusing on growing your business.
Yeah. And I think I was actually just reading something this morning that was targeted at authors, I should say, looking to get published, and telling them the value of hiring an editor. Well, it's very much the same thing, because the writer's point there was you have to spend money to make money. And that's one of the things that's really gotten me over some barriers. And just like you're saying, you do have to spend money in certain aspects in order to make money. And looking at the return that you can get off of certain things can definitely help with that.
Yeah, and just something that we actually didn't say at the beginning, but that we think is really important is this is outsourcing within your business, but there's also a lot of pieces of your personal life that you can outsource. So we have a great post on the site about different aspects of your personal life that might make sense to outsource. We'll be sure to put that in the show notes as well.
Definitely. Yeah, no. And it's funny because for some people, like there are certain things about my business that other people might dread. Like I actually love digging into the numbers sometimes and doing bookkeeping or organizing certain things, because sometimes you just kind of need those mindless tasks, or, where you're not expending a ton of creative energy at least. But then I think about certain things where I'm like, I would love to have somebody come clean my house, because I would actually rather be doing the books for my business than cleaning my kitchen. So it is really important to think about not just your business as a solopreneur, because your business and life are often very much intertwined, but the other areas of your life that you can outsource to alleviate some pressure.
Yes, absolutely. My example is I have a maid for the first time in my life, which I can't decide if I'm really proud of or really embarrassed by. Part of me is like, it's just, I don't know, just awful, but it's pretty amazing. And so one thing that she does is she does a lot of the prep for our vegetables. And so I kind of get all the benefit of cooking healthy, fresh meals, because I love to cook, but I don't have to chop everything. Kind of a win-win.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. So what would you say is the first thing to do in order to kind of prepare yourself for outsourcing?
Yeah, so one thing that we talk about a lot, we actually did this with our business coach, is tracking our time. So we talked about it in the Solopreneur Sanity Handbook. And it was super, super helpful for us to see where we were spending our time, where we could put our processes around things, and things that we didn't necessarily need to have our hands on. So one big example for us is onboarding members. It's a pretty easy process. It's time consuming, but easy. And so that was a perfect thing for us to outsource. And we wouldn't have really realized that unless we had been tracking our time. Do you have an example of an epiphany from time tracking?
Yeah. at least in our business, one of the big things was the amount of time I was spending on editing guest posts and adding the simple caveat when we, or the simple guideline, I should say, when we accept guest posts, that I actually won't be spending too much time editing because I was feeling a certain obligation, and then I was spending an inordinate amount of time editing posts before they went up. So that was a game changer, and it didn't necessarily mean we were going to hire a blog editor, but it did make us look at the process a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. So we one thing that Julianne talks about in her post on our site is that distinction of sometimes you start looking at things to outsource and you end up saying, actually, I'm not even going to outsource this. I'm just going to drop it, or I'm going to change it. But getting a good bird's eye view of your business is definitely a great step.
Yeah. So in tracking your time, you clearly make note of what could be outsourced. But the other thing that it makes you do is, like I said, just look at the process. And when you're looking at the process, and this is super easy to do when you're not actually doing it, create some process docs. So as you are uploading that blog post, making note of every step that you're taking when you're doing it. As you're setting up your weekly blab, making note of the steps that are going into it, recording short video tutorials or screen captures, so that you are set up when somebody comes on to equip them with your process, but also refine your process in the meantime. And those are things you can be doing every day. Before you ever bring anybody on.
Yeah, for sure. We did a lot of work around that, and it's helped us a ton. And another great suggestion from our business coach that we hadn't really thought of, we had a word guide, which is basically, we're pretty picky about being very consistent. So when we write blog posts or we write email marketing, we want it to look like it's definitely coming from one woman shop. It's not coming from 20 different people. So we're very picky about things like eCourse has a dash in it or ebook doesn't. We're not really sure how we reach half of our rules, but we're there. But one thing that our business coach suggested was having a glossary. And so I think that we both found that extremely helpful. So we use a ton of acronyms. We say MC instead of MailChimp or WP instead of WordPress. And so having one repository of all those those acronyms and all the different terms that we're using, affiliate marketing, in one place was really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a really important piece to point out, in that when you outsource, you learn a lot about your business, about how things are done, about how you prefer things to be done. So setting up that documentation beforehand can get you started on that process. But as we've brought other people in to help with the business, we have transformed a few different things and learned a lot.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I feel like this is a huge time for us to be honest, because we have struggled in outsourcing in the past. And I think a lot of it has come down to that idea of, well, it's just faster if we do it ourselves. And I think that we are for sure getting over that hurdle, slowly but surely. And so one thing that I've thought about a lot, and I know we've talked about, is how do you know? It's like a relationship. I was comparing this to being in a relationship. If you are dating a bunch of different people and you're like, they're all crazy, maybe you're the crazy one. And so I thought about this in terms of outsourcing, that if you have these patterns of really bad hires over and over, maybe that's something that you need to look at from your perspective. But sometimes then you just find that right person and it clicks into place and you're like, maybe it wasn't crazy. Maybe it was a little crazy. Maybe it was a balance. Can you talk a little bit more about that and lessons we've learned from our hiring?
Yeah, so I think the first time last spring, we considered bringing on a VA. And we were still very much setting up our own processes. And so one of the biggest lessons we learned there, and we really liked the person we were working with, but the volume of questions we were getting at first, we were kind of thinking, oh, is this something that, she's just not picking it up, or she just isn't getting it, whatever our definition of that is. But it took us taking a really firm step back and saying, we're not ready for this because we're not setting her up for success, because we don't have certain processes mapped out. And we do just kind of do stuff as we prefer to do it while we're in the moment. So that was the first time we did that. That gave us the push we needed for about 6 months to step back and really set stuff up on our own. What would you pull out of that I didn't touch on there, Cristina?
So I would say one of our biggest takeaways when outsourcing is if you are working with someone, and so let's say you do a child, you give them a task and you give them, maybe you're not super happy with the end product, you give them feedback, and they then do a very similar project and aren't able to take the feedback that you gave in the first round. That to me is just sign number one that maybe they aren't going to be the right fit because they can't take the feedback and they can't apply it to the next project.
Yeah, that was really important to us. We certainly don't mind clearly giving feedback, but it's being able to respond to that feedback.
Take the feedback and roll with it for the next time, for sure.
Yeah, and it is really important. This came up actually as we were interviewing people, but it's also very important during the process is asking questions. So somebody that doesn't ask questions sends up a red flag for us because we do want them to be inquiring about the process and not necessarily critiquing, but asking the right questions that make us better and that help them do their job better. So that was that's something that we had somebody that doesn't do that and we have somebody that does do that, and you can see a very firm difference.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I just remember looking back one time, and so this is the distinguishing, is it you or is it them or some combination? But I just remember looking back at a task that I was not happy with the outcome, and I was like, I just don't understand. Like, I could do this again. Going back, I could just do it. And I looked back at the process I had laid out, and I looked at the parts of the project that I wasn't happy with, and I was like, you know what? The things that she didn't do, I didn't even say. I didn't mention in the process documents. And so that was a very clear example of definitely my fault. Definitely falls back on me.
Yeah, and I do want to go back to that mental barrier we have, well, a few of them when it comes to outsourcing. And the one that you brought up specifically of, I can do this myself or I can do this better. A lot of that I think stems from control, which at least personally, and so having those process docs actually gives you that control that you're looking for because you are kind of dictating how things are going to go, but it still leaves a little bit of room for interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we like to make sure that the people we're working with know that if they have a much better process for working on things, that we're definitely, it doesn't mean that we're going to adopt it tomorrow. But we'll definitely kind of put it in the pipeline and talk about it. So one thing that's come up for us, for example, is a project management tool. So we've been talking about that a lot with the whole One Woman Shop community. So you'll definitely see some posts on that coming up soon. But that's something where we're not going to necessarily just jump into it tomorrow, but we are going to explore it and look at it. So
yeah. So I know we have Amanda's pretty active over there in the chat. She's singing right now. But if anybody wants to jump in and kind of tell us what their signal is for how to know when to outsource or share a story of outsourcing, we'd love to have you. But yeah, Cristina, what would you say to somebody that is having, I want to go back to that idea of I'm a one-woman shop. If I hire anybody or bring anybody on for help, I'm no longer a one-woman shop.
Yeah. I would say life is better. Partnerships and collaborations and outsourcing. No, I would say you're still welcome in the one-woman shop community, which is really all that matters, right? But no, just that, just all the things we talked about, that you can expand your business faster, you can be happier in your business, that there's a ton of benefits, and that asking for help in your life and in your business does not make you weak, and it doesn't make you less legitimate. So.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, because what Amanda said when you brought up the fact that you're not sure if you should feel guilty or really proud of having a maid, Why do we feel kind of embarrassed or shy away from sharing when we've asked for help? And that is really important because we do that. But realizing that it's in asking for help that we can actually grow and become better, that we can actually feel a little bit more proud of that.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting though, because I saw Amanda's comment about the maid, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, why am I embarrassed about that? And when reading the 4-Hour Work Week, one thing that really struck me was, I think that there is the possibility of going so far to the other extreme where you're outsourcing everything and you have kind of lost your stake in the business. And it's just kind of running without you. And maybe this is just like founder syndrome speaking, but I think that there's something really pretty magical to cooking a home cooked meal or writing a blog post or doing pieces of your business. But I think that there's a long way that you can outsource before you get to that point where you're just like so far removed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as long as you view it as kind of dabbling with outsourcing first, not saying I'm going to outsource everything I don't enjoy or everything I don't know how to do, but looking at the one imminent need that you have right now that can really help you push forward. So Jenny said in the chat there, I outsource when the pace of my goals is far too slow for comfort. So identifying what's holding you back and just starting with that. We always say, start with the next best step. Same with outsourcing. Identify that one thing. And even it can be, if it's a huge thing, like email marketing, for example, I'm not going to outsource all of my email marketing. I'm looking for somebody to help me set up list segmentation. So identifying one piece of that thing to get started with, and then seeing how that can grow and if it needs to grow.
I love that you said that, because I was thinking of this post that is being published very soon on the site. You would know a specific date because our editor over here, but about outsourcing for Instagram. And so one thing that really struck me, preview of the post, is that she doesn't outsource 100% of her Instagram. She outsources part of it. And so really looking at all of your tasks, and I think time tracking absolutely helps with this, but looking at all your tasks and saying, what part do I really love? What part do I want to hand in? And what part am I good handing off? So I hate spoiling the whole post, but it's still an amazing post to read, and there's lots of other value. But she basically says she outsources the graphics for her Instagram, but she does all of the communication. So she does all the commenting and responding to comments. And so that's a really cool way to still be active in that aspect of her business, but also outsource the part that's not her strength.
Yes, exactly. And I could keep going there, but like you said, we'll let the post tell that story. So
yes.
that'll be up in the next few days, actually. I'm excited for that one too. Glad you brought that up.
I'm curious, and now I feel like this should be like a book club read, but I'm curious if you've ever read Strength Finders.
Strength Finders? No, I haven't.
So this is, I feel like we'll do something with this now, but it's basically about making the most of your strengths while mitigating your challenges, your weaknesses. And so it's basically this little personality test that helps you determine what are your strengths, and then how to make the most of them. And so we should definitely do some stuff with that, because I think that ties into outsourcing, is really capitalizing on your strengths.
Yeah, I love it. Jenny agrees. Fantastic book. I'm always looking for new book recommendations, so I was like, I'll write that one down.
Excellent.
Reading Stephanie's question here.
Yes, we got a question in the chat. That's it. Okay. So basically, Stephanie says she's been attempting the business world for about 2 years now, and she has outsourced, and her fear is that she's not communicating what she needs because she doesn't fully understand it, or she's just getting taken advantage of, which I think is a very legitimate fear. And she spent a lot of money. Her husband's supportive, but wondering if we have any suggestions. Great question.
Yeah, so being taken advantage of is definitely something that it's trial and error, and you'll get into different relationships where, like we said, you kind of have to back up and ask yourself if this is the right person. But it's we kind of look at those costs as learning opportunities, because you can't get that money back, but you can learn from it. So I'd be interested to know what you're doing to communicate your needs with the people that you're bringing on. So if you have any sort of process doc set up for what you're looking for, or what you actually, how you actually reached out to them and communicated your need. But hopefully some of the things we did talk about with communication helped today.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I think another huge value of having a community like One Woman Shop is that people will pop into the Facebook group and say things like yesterday I have this client who said this thing to me and I'm just confused. I don't know what to do about it. But so the Facebook group and it doesn't have to be One Woman Shop. We're pretty awesome, but it's up to you to choose a community that you find really supportive, or a mastermind, an accountability group, but having in place a kind of reality check. So let's say that you want to get a new website and you reach out to a few different people, get a few quotes, then hopping into a Facebook group and saying, hey, does this look like what I can expect to pay? Does this look like I might be getting taken advantage of? And obviously everyone's going to have different opinions, but a lot of times you can kind of crowdsource a good answer.
Yeah, it's really important to have people to bounce stuff off of. And the thing that I would add to that is, if you are in a place, Stephanie, where you can pause whatever this relationship is, or pause the contract and your business keeps running and it doesn't set you back too far, definitely taking that time to step away from it and take a deeper look into it would be really helpful.
Yeah. And so Stephanie followed up with, had 2 websites designed and still don't know what I want exactly. So I would say part of working with someone is for sure clarifying what you do want, but also taking the time to really think through what you're looking for. And so maybe you don't know, for example, the design that you want on your site, but you know the goal. You know that you want it to sell pillows and throw pillows. And so you know the goal, and you know that you need stuff that basically feeds that goal. Or let's say that you want a blog and you know you really like feminine and sleek designs. This is our joke because I only know three vocab words when describing WordPress themes, which is sleek, feminine, and chic. So basically knowing either your goal or knowing what you want the aesthetics to be, I think, is really helpful first step. Do you have anything to add to that, Sarah?
Yeah, so I think that especially because you've said by email is your communication, one really important thing when you're working with new people is identifying the best route for communication. So maybe email is just not working for you in communicating what you need, and seeing if you can hop on a call with somebody or a Google Hangout. So we've definitely had to experiment with different ways of communicating with people that fit both our needs and their needs to make sure that the communication is really clear.
Yeah. Well, and I can't believe we didn't say this yet, but referrals are huge. So asking around if you have other friends who are business owners and asking who that they worked with. And so I think that's one of the issues with Fiverr. I think that there's a review system on sites like Fiverr. But a lot of times I know people might have a bad experience and they don't want to go on and bash the person. So you don't see the negative reviews. It's like Airbnb. And so definitely asking for referrals can be extremely helpful to make you feel like you're not getting taken advantage of. We don't want that.
Yeah, no, I really hope this is helpful, Stephanie. And we did just have Julianne join, and she's the person that we've been referring to a few times who wrote our primer post for this month. Hi, Julianne.
Hey, Julianne. We're going to put your post in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Stephanie, if you want to contact us at all, and if you have any follow-up questions, we love using blabs to generate ideas for more blabs. So we're hello@onewomanshop.com. So if you have any follow-up questions, or if you want to hop on the email list and get to know the community a little bit, you're more than welcome. That's an open invitation to anyone, except for the guy who wrote the foul thing in the comments. You're not welcome to join our email list.
Skim right over that.
There was some pretty nasty things happening over there. Wrap up.
Thank you, Amanda, for repeating that. We appreciate it. Yeah, Stephanie, I'm sorry. Amanda's got me all distracted now. Stephanie, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. We're glad we could help, and we're so glad that you're on today. If anybody else has any questions, like Cristina said, we can always be reached at hello@onewomanshop. we will be back next week at 11 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday for our episode on stalling and procrastination, which I think we're both really excited to talk about because we're both guilty of it.
I never do those things.
Excuse me.
No, yeah, we have lots of tips, and we'll definitely be referencing the Silicon Our Sanity handbook like 20 times. So.
Really?
Yep.
So yeah, definitely head over to the blog. We'll have a recap up of this soon, and with several show notes and resources.
Yep. See you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.